armoured tanks, it lacked manoeuvrability, and optimal performance depended on careful maintenance and a highly trained crew. This, combined with its weight, limited range and slow speed, made it more suitable for defence than attack. But deployed in support of fixed defences, even limited numbers of Tigers could make an immense contribution to the battle. Despite the setbacks and reverses of 1943, morale within the German army still remained high. Among frontline units, there was a conscious recognition of past achievements, a high level of professionalism, and a wealth of experience. Bonds of comradeship formed in training had been tested in the gravest of adversities. This was especially true of the Waffen-SS. In the East, the SS had demonstrated a fanatical determination, proving as resolute in defence as they were vigorous in attack. In 1944, the SS Panzer divisions were the only units in the army maintained at or near establishment in armour and men. Rundstedt would have 6 such divisions for the Battle of Normandy. It was upon these that he and many of his officers pinned their strategies and their hopes. By 1944, the Allies had established a massive lead in the clandestine war of intelligence gathering and deception. While German reconnaissance flights flown over Britain had virtually ceased, those flown over occupied Europe by the Allies were growing more numerous every day. Yet aerial reconnaissance provided only a part of the volume of information that helped to formulate and refine Allied plans. A wealth of information came from the occupied territories themselves. In the preceding years, the resistance networks had been armed and organised by British agents. Almost all were equipped with radio transmitters. Information gathered by the networks was often of immense value. Reports from the resistance kept Allied planners abreast of every development: the location of fuel and ammunition dumps, enemy troop strengths and morale, and the existence of camouflaged installations, often invisible from the air. In May alone, nearly 4,000 such reports were sent to England. Some networks were inevitably discovered and compromised, but the sheer volume of intelligence gathered more than outweighed the risks involved. Another rich source of information was, ironically, the German army itself. As early as 1940, British intelligence had been regularly decoding German radio ciphers. Such an elaborate system of secrecy surrounded these operations that the German army remained utterly unaware that its security had been so gravely compromised. From these sources, the Allies knew that the Germans expected the invasion to take place in the area of the Pas de Calais. To reinforce this belief, and to ensure the continuing commitment of men and resources to the area, they contrived a huge campaign of deception. For every mission flown over Normandy, 2 were flown over the Pas de Calais. Radio traffic was artificially generated to convince the Germans that this was where they intended to land. Other clues were dropped to suggest diversionary landings would be made in Norway and in the west of France. To support these efforts, naval operations, including naval reconnaissance and minesweeping, were conducted with equal or greater thoroughness in the Straits of Dover and in the North Atlantic waters between Scotland and Norway. Even when the Allies landed in Normandy, it was hoped that these measures would still have residual consequences, causing the German High Command to hesitate, suspect Normandy of being a diversion, and maintain the concentration of troops in the Pas de Calais. In May, the air offensive was further escalated with systematic low-level attacks on a range of secondary targets in France and the Low Countries. These included individual transportation targets, enemy headquarters, radar and communication systems, airfields and bridges, and ammunition, fuel and supply dumps. To ensure security and to reinforce the campaign of deception, the offensive was mounted on a broad front, with the greatest concentration of attacks falling in the area of the Pas de Calais. Simultaneously, resistance activity was stepped up. These operations, though necessarily limited and highly localized in nature, helped to further disable the transport and communication systems and to tie up significant German forces that could be more profitably employed in coastal defense. In mid-May, with impeccable timing, the last strategic deception began to unfold. In Italy, the Allied armies began their long-prepared offensive against the Gustav Line. By the end of May 1944, all of the essential preconditions for a cross-channel attack had been met. In the Atlantic, and in the waters between Britain and the continent, Allied naval power was supreme. In the skies over France and the Low Countries, their air forces had achieved almost total mastery. In the months leading up to D-Day, the transportation offensive had been pressed with mounting intensity. Throughout northwest France, hardly a bridge remained intact. The radar and communication system was in ruins, and the Third Air Fleet reduced to little more than a skeleton formation. In Britain, the long period of preparation was coming to an end. The assembly of men and equipment was complete. Training programs were being wound down, final rehearsals conducted, and the men briefed. In Italy, the Allies had captured the forbidding redoubt of Monte Cassino, turned the Gustav Line, and at last broken into the Liri Valley. By the end of the month, they were advancing on a broad front. The capture of Rome was now only a matter of time. The month of June opened auspiciously for the Allies. For the Germans, it promised only further exhausting battles and a remorseless, steady withering of their strength in every theatre of operations. In early May, Allied planners had set a target date for the landings of June the 5th. This promised the most favourable conditions